Classical conditioning is a type of learning in which a subject comes to associate stimuli. A neutral stimulus that signals an unconditioned stimulus begins to produce a response that anticipates and prepares for the unconditioned stimulus. Remy begins to build an association between the click, which is the neutral stimulus, and a treat, or food rewarded, which is an unconditioned stimulus. This builds the foundation for classical conditioning by creating a conditioned response, which is the tricks.
In classical conditioning, the unconditioned stimulus is a stimulus that unconditionally, naturally, and automatically triggers a response. For example, when the Simple Tricks group was trying to teach the rat to salivate to the clicker, the unconditioned stimulus was the food because the rat automatically salivates to it without thinking about it. A neutral stimulus is a stimulus which initially produces no specific response other than focusing attention and later becomes the conditioned stimulus. When the Simple Tricks group was teaching the rat to salivate to the clicker was the neutral stimulus and it later became the conditioned stimulus because the rat learned to respond to it when before it was irrelevant to the rat.
The conditioned response is a learned response to a conditioned stimulus. This response is almost identical to the unconditioned stimulus, except that now the behavior occurs in response to a conditioned stimulus, as opposed to an unconditioned stimulus. In Pavlov's experiment, the dogs had learned to associate the bell with food, and their reaction, which was salivation, was a conditioned response. For Remy, it was simply doing the tricks.
Positive reinforcement is when an event or stimulus is presented after a behavior. This causes the behavior to increase, and it strengthens the response. It is part of operant conditioning. When a favorable outcome or reward occurs after a behavior, it is more likely that the behavior will occur again. The most common type of positive reinforcement is praise or a treat such as food.
Training is using operant conditioning to teach a complex response by linking together less complex skills. This behavior technique involves breaking a task down into smaller components. The simplest way to do this is to teach it the process of the first task. Once that task has been learned, the next task can be taught. This process continues until the entire sequence is successfully chained together. An example of this is making Remy do multiple tricks such as weaving through obstacles, walking across on a stick, and putting a ball in a bowl.
A cognitive map or a mental map is a mental representation of the layout of one's environment. These rely on memory and allow Remy to recognize the path of the maze that will lead her to the positive reinforcement, which is the treat or the food she's being given. The more she rehearses the maze, the stronger the memory will become, and the faster she will be able to complete it. Remy was able to complete the maze after practicing in about 6 seconds.